Okay, so I'm going to continue with the kind of rough and ready F-15 tutorial. I'm going to kind of skip ahead a few phases to beyond visual range combat. Uh, so we're going to go through a couple of radar modes and different weapons. I'm going to do an active pause to pause the simulation, but I can still use my controls and stuff like that. So the world should stop moving, but I can still operate the airplane. Okay, so just a general orientation. Everybody knows what the heads-up display is, hopefully. That's this right here. This is our radar warning receiver. As we can see, the 50 on the left is a A50 AWACS, and the 29, actually there's four of those kind of real close together. Those are Sukhoi 27s, flankers, which carry the same radar as the MiG-29, so they both have the same RWR code. This is our radar display, currently off, and this is our weapons display, which shows us what our armament is. So what I'm going to do is put my HUD into BVR mode, and you should have that bound to your HOTAS. Okay, so things change. That circle is the recommended firing cone, so if you want to shoot your AMRAAM, you're going to want to put your, well, if you want to shoot your AMRAAM, you're going to want to put your target preferably inside that circle. Right now my radar is off, so the AMRAAMs aren't really doing anything. The way AMRAAMs work is they have a kind of a, the pattern is this. You lock it onto the target, and the missile gets information from the aircraft as to where the target is and where it should be going, and then you launch it within the best parameters. Halfway to the target, roughly, that AMRAAM is going to go what they call pit bull, which means it's using its own guidance system to guide to the target. At that point, you don't need to do anything else. You should be heading in the other direction. So that is what gives the AMRAAM its advantage. About halfway through its path, you can head the other way and start dropping countermeasures or climb or dive or do whatever you need to do to get out of the path of that missile, which is probably coming at you from the flanker. So let's turn on our radar. And it defaults to RWS, or range while search mode. You can see that's the best mode to use to find targets because it has a wider search pattern. Move it out to 40 miles. Nothing, and there's 80 miles. So I'm going to pause the video and I will be right back. Okay, so range while search mode. That's this wide search pattern. Now that, generally speaking, what I've noticed, at least on multiplayer servers, is that I notice transmissions on the RWR before I can find them on radar. A lot of times they're doing things to kind of conceal the radar signature, like fly sideways to you, put you on the beam, stuff like that. But that's a pretty good indicator of what direction they're coming from, but not the range. For that, what I like to do is when you see that ping on the RWR, point the airplane generally in that direction and go to RWS mode here. And that's how you find your target. Now when you go to engage your target, one way to do it, if you want to do it old school, if you want to use the AIM-7 Sparrow style mode of engagement, select the Sparrow here. That's M2M on the HUD. You find it in RWS and then you hard lock it, and what that does is it focuses your radar entirely on one airplane. That means is you lose sight of everything else. So that's one of the major drawbacks of the AIM-7 Sparrow. But you do look in the HUD and you see that little square out there, that's our target. So let's go ahead and engage the target with the Sparrow, and then we'll come back to the AMRAAMs here in a second. You probably won't be using the Sparrow very much, but one advantage it has is that when you go to STT, you see right there on the bottom left, single target track mode, it only guides to that target. With the AMRAAM, especially if you have friendlies out in front of you, there's a chance that when it goes autonomous, it tracks a friendly target instead of the one that you had designated when you fired the missile. So you got to be really careful. That's why a lot of multiplayer servers, it's a good idea to carry at least a couple of Sparrow missiles. So let's unpause the sim. You notice the Sparrow has a much smaller engagement zone than the AMRAAM does. So can see just barely 4 dots out there. Those are our Sukhois. Another thing to remember, let's put the active pause back on. Dogfights are all about energy state, like how fast you are, how high you are. Airplanes, when you're fighting, you want to preserve as much energy as you can. The same is true of missiles. So the higher you are, when you fire that missile, the more energy it has, and therefore the more maneuverability it has when it gets close to the target to turn and try to hit it. If you're at low altitude, it's going to burn up its rocket motor fuel pretty quickly, and it's going to run out of energy, and it's just running on its own inertia at that point. So the higher you are, the more you get an assist from gravity. Keep that in mind. That's on pause. We're going to close to these things. Zoom out a little bit so you can see those yellow lights go on. We've got firing solution, which should be in about a second here. And with the Sparrow missile, we have to keep that target inside that cone the entire time, or it will lose the target. Okay, Fox 1. Sparrow, there it goes. And as a dogfight missile, these things actually aren't too bad. Though they're designed for kind of beyond visual range stuff. So the energy state I mentioned is another really good reason why it's a good idea to be as fast as possible when you fire the missile. It gives it a good push, it gives it more energy as it goes off the rail, which means it has more energy to maneuver and try and hit the target. It looks like the Sparrow missed, so let's fire a second one. We're getting in pretty close. It looks like these aren't really tracking that well. Boom, okay, it did track. Boom. So there's no kill like overkill. So that's how you use the Sparrow. Now, it was a much simpler engagement than is possible with the AMRAAM. What's this out here? That looks like something that needs to be shot. Let's switch over to AMRAAMs. We're in track while search mode. Let's see what we can get. You can see these Sukhois have gotten behind me and have locked their radars onto me. Had this been real, I'd be pretty dead right now, but I'm just kind of trying to show how the weapons work. Alright, I'll pause it and we'll probably restart this mission and use some AMRAAMs here in a second. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the AMRAAM specifically, and kind of building off of what we did with the previous 2 segments, figuring out the 2 different radar modes. In the AIM-7 Sparrow, we're going to go on to the natural evolution, which is the AIM-120 AMRAAM, also called the SPAMRAAM, if you're into multiplayer, for good reason, because you can just kind of spam that, and probably going to kill a lot of things. What I want to do is look at the map here first, because what you will have noticed in the previous couple of segments is that we saw the AWACS out here on our RWR, and we saw the flankers here on our radar, but we didn't see these two flights, even though they were actually there. And the reason for that is because the F-15 has a Pulse Doppler radar, and how that works is it's really good at detecting things that are closing, coming in toward you, or separating out away from you. Like, that's the Doppler effect, right? That's how it works. If something's flying perpendicular to your flight path, like this cargo plane here and this pair of RAF Hawks, well, they're painted like RAF Hawks, but there's a good chance you won't notice them. You'll notice I was like, in the previous segment, I'm like, hey, what's this? It's something that needs to be shot. It showed up and then disappeared on my radar. It was this cargo plane flying from my 9 o'clock to my 3 o'clock, and it kind of popped up and then it went away, and that's because it was beaming me. That means I was over its wing, and that's a beam defense. Putting an enemy radar over your wing while you fly perpendicular to his flight path is actually a really good defense, not only against his radar, but against his missiles, and we'll get into that here shortly. One thing I also wanted to do is show you a bit about ranges. So we're going to bust out the ruler here. As you can see, these targets are 60 miles away, and if you've read about the AMRAAM, the AIM-120C, you'll know it's got an effective range of, what, like 40 miles. However, missile physics and tracking and behavior in DCS is somewhat weird and may not be as realistic as we may like it to. In actuality, an AMRAAM, when it launches, if we understand correctly, it doesn't fly straight at the target. It uses its rocket fuel to climb as high as it can, and then uses gravity to, in the terminal phase as it closes in on the target, it's got all that energy built up from when it climbed up, higher than you, to kind of go ballistically, kind of like artillery, straight down into the target. And it's got all that energy, all that altitude, all that speed. They can use that energy to turn and track into its target. In DCS, though, they kind of go straight at the target instead of climbing up in the air. And the consequence of that is that instead of the advertised 40-mile range, we've got an effective range of something like, at best, 20 miles, but more realistically, if you're playing against AI or other players, you're going to be not really shooting until you're at about 15 miles. So I want to draw this out a little bit here. Here we've got a jousting match. Now, in this situation, obviously, I set the flankers to, they're not armed, so we're not going to worry about them too much. How this goes is you want first shot, first kill, right? So how it typically works is this. You've got you and the F-15 heading this way. You've got this flight of evil communists sorry, no, I don't want to get political here, heading into you this way. And if you look at their published range on the missiles they're carrying, which is going to be the R-27ER, I believe, their long-range missile actually outranges your AMRAAM. So they're actually going to fire first in DCS most of the time, and you're going to know about it. Your RWR is going to go crazy, is going to go pop, 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 and your plane is going to say missile, 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 and that means you should already have your ECM pod on. We're going to talk about countermeasures a lot, but let's remove countermeasures for the sake of explanation here. We're just going to do a jousting match with one missile each. So as this guy gets closer, at a range of what, let's say about 30 miles, he's gonna, let's give him 20 miles to R-15. When we get that close to him, he's gonna fire his R-27. And we're gonna know about it because our RWR is gonna light up, we're gonna get all kinds of warnings. Now, it's gonna get, now we've got another 5 miles to go before we can launch our AMRAAM. Remember, we've got a range of about 15. The advantage we have, even though it's going to take a lot of like nerves of steel to keep flying forward into the face of a flanker that just shot a missile at you and that's tracking on you very well, what we have is an AMRAAM that's going to go autonomous after, I forget the exact range, but you're going to see a little indicator in your HUD saying it went autonomous, it's gone pitbull. What that means is it doesn't need you to paint the target with your radar anymore. Meanwhile, the flanker needs to paint you the entire time of that missile flight. So even though you've got a missile coming in at you, you're going to be able to break away from that missile and head back the other way while your missile is still tracking on the target. Now, he might dodge the first one, but if you fire two about 5 seconds apart, when he does his evasive turn, he's going to burn off like all of his energy, and he's probably going to eat the second missile or the third, which is why they call them the spam ram. You just kind of fire two at each target, a couple seconds apart, you're gonna do pretty well. So what I want to do is kind of simulate an engagement here. Again, he's not going to be firing back. This is just for training purposes only. And let's get into it. You've heard enough of my yapping. I hope that kind of summed up the BVR jousting situation we tend to see in DCS. Also note that if you're flying against AI instead of other players, they have a simplified flight physics model, which means that they can do a lot more evasive turns, climbs, and stuff like that without suffering any as many energy loss penalties as you will as a player. So keep that in mind too. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get in range for my AMRAAM, and then I'm going to probably do active pause again. So we're going to fly, turn on our radar. We are going to switch our radar. Once we find our target, I'm going to lock them up, and then we're going to go into find the target, go to track while scan mode, and then we're going to lock a single target this time just for a demonstration. Although you're fully capable of engaging 2 or even more targets simultaneously with the AMRAAM and the F-15. It's pretty awesome. That's why, part of why the F-15 is just so dominant, both in real life and in DCS. So we're going to go down here on our weapons sidewinders. Okay, A120C, and we still haven't detected anything. I'm going to go to active pause here because I want to show you one other thing. Here you see this. Let's reduce our radar here. So we're at 40 miles. See that 34 and the 12 on the left? That is an indicator that shows the maximum and minimum altitude that your radar is scanning at. So it can detect targets up to 34,000 feet and down to 12,000 feet. And you can move that up and down as you fly. And you notice as I zoom the radar out to higher ranges, that cone gets bigger. That's because it's searching, think of it like a giant flashlight. I often think of a radar as a flashlight and an eyeball in one unit, and I think that's a pretty good analogy. And we'll get into that when we talk more about ECM, which I won't muddy the waters with right now. But as you can see, we've got a good, we can detect our target, so I'm going to switch to track while scan mode, and I'm only going to lock one target. And it looks like he's got a range of about 45 miles. You can see down here on the bottom right, R, that's target range. Okay, so active pause again. What I want to do when I know I'm going to engage something, and I'm getting close to the maximum range of my missile, I'm going to go to BVR mode on my HUD. Got my AMRAAMs armed. And sometimes when you do that, it changes your radar back to RWS mode for some reason. So go back to track while scan, go to target, soft lock it. Now I've got a firing solution. Now, the things you want to watch is the R on the right. This is 38 miles. I guess it's not fully paused. We're still moving very slowly. And this vertical bar kind of to the immediate left of your altitude bar, that's your dynamic launch zone. And this takes into account your closure rate, how high you are relative to the target, how fast he's coming at you, if he's climbing or diving or running the other way or all that other stuff. It's a dynamic launch zone, which calculates kind of an estimated probability of your missile hitting the target if fired at the present moment. So let's unpause the sim. So basically, as you get closer to your target, that little caret that says 824, 825, I think that's your closure rate. So, like I said, I'm going to try and increase altitude, and I just lit my afterburners because I want to give my missile the biggest push I possibly can and the most energy I can impart into it by climbing. That means it's going to dive and it's going to have a bigger advantage over the target. As I do that, you'll notice this circle getting bigger. That means the probability of hit in my firing window is also increasing. Now we're getting into the maximum range. You see that kind of caret getting closer to that little horizontal slash? That's the maximum range for a compliant target. And we're going to get a yellow light once it crosses that, which means theoretically if we fire now, it's got a good chance of hitting. Let's do an active pause again. Now I'm higher than the target. It's at about what it looks like, 25 miles. Okay, we got 22. It looks like missile time of flight would be about 22 seconds. Now I know for a fact that this guy is programmed to fly straight at me. He's not going to be doing any evasive turns. He's not going to turn and brake and run for the other direction. He's not going to pump any countermeasures. He's not going to turn on his ECM pod. So it's kind of an ideal shot. And I can fire now. So Fox 3. Now, watch this. See that T13, T12, T11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Okay, that's your time until the missile goes autonomous. Once that hits 0, boom, M13, that means the missile doesn't need you anymore. And presuming that was a hostile target, we need to get the hell out of Dodge. We're going to pop countermeasures. We can dive for the ground, which is actually a really good idea to pick up your speed. Because remember, had this been a real scenario, he would probably have fired an R-27ER at us. And I don't know if I got a hit or not. Let's cheat a little bit. Oh, it looks like I got a hit on him, but it didn't kill the target. Well, he doesn't look too good, does he? So we did get a hit. Sometimes you hit them with a missile and they just don't die. That's just kind of how the damage model works against AI sometimes. So that's how it works. But I could have done that a lot better, and I'll explain that here in a moment. Let's reset the scenario. Let's fly that again. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to employ a little better defensive tactics. Like I said, you want to impart as much energy into that missile before you fire it as possible. So that means you want to climb, you want to light your afterburner. Let's do that now since I know I'm going to close on a target. Turn my radar on. BVR mode. Got my AMRAAMs queued up. We're ready to go again. I'm going to increase my range out to, let's say, 80. Also, another thing to note when you're trying to defend against a missile is a missile is nothing but a rocket. The thinner the air is, the better the missiles, the less drag the missile experiences. So at low altitude, since the air is thicker, if you're doing a lot of turns, you can do you can fly kind of a spiral around the missile, and every time that missile turns, it's going to bleed energy against the air and kind of help your defense a little bit, which is part of the reason I like to dive when I run away from a missile. Alright, so I'm not seeing him yet, though I know he's here. We're scooting. Okay, so go to track while scan mode, soft lock a target, and I'm just going to go head on against him. So before we fire the missile, we want to close as quickly as possible because we want to enter our maximum firing range and give it a bunch of energy. Right now I'm in full afterburner, which you can see here. Kind of sprinting toward the target. Right now he's at 40 miles. And I lost a lock for some reason. Sometimes that happens. You need to relock it. I'm going to decrease radar range to 40 miles. At least I wanted to. There we go. Now, active pause. When I fire this missile, remember that you can see the radar scanning kind of left and right. You can point that missile, slew it way over sideways. I think up to I can't remember the exact angle. I'll pause it. But you can point it well off your bore sight, kind of sideways. And we do that right after we fire the missile. The reason being because it's, like I said, we've got a missile probably coming in toward us. So that said, we want to buy enough time for that missile to go autonomous. Fox 3. I'm going to chop my throttle, and I'm going to turn as far as I can, still looking at that radar, keeping that, you know, my radar still has a lock on the target, but I'm flying kind of perpendicularly, like kind of a beam to the target. That's going to decrease my closure rate. T3, T2, T1, boom, pitbull. Now it doesn't need me anymore. I can get the hell out of there. Kind of see where I'm going with that? That decreases the amount of time that his missile has to lock onto me and do what it wants to do. Meanwhile, my missile doesn't need me anymore, and I can bolt. Now, doesn't look too good here for this engagement. I think this missile might have missed. I may have cranked a little too hard or too early. But it gives you the idea. I'm going to circle around and do it again. There's our MiGs. I'm sorry, Sukhois. Boom. Okay. So what I'm going to do is fire Fox 3. I'm going to see my time's a little shorter because the range is closer. I'm going to kind of start my turn away from them. Then it goes autonomous, and then I'm free to, you know, climb away from the missile or do a beam defense and hope his radar doesn't pick me up or anything like that. Let's go back to F6 mode and watch my missile hit the ground. Here's missile number 2. Boom. That didn't Wasn't as pretty as I wanted it to be, but you get the idea. And remember too, most of the time you're going to fire, wait maybe 3 to 5 seconds, and then fire a second one, because as he does his evasive turn, two things are going to happen. One, unless he wants to eat that AMRAAM, he's going to have to break his lock on you most likely and head back in the other direction. Second, while he does his turn, he's going to bleed energy as well. He's going to have to do a high G maneuver or something like that to kind of not eat, you know, a missile in the face. So he might dodge the first missile, but chances are pretty good that when he does that, he bleeds so much energy that he doesn't have enough juice to do another evasive turn before the second missile hits him. So that's the general idea. And if you're interested, maybe we can talk about countermeasures, chaff, ECM, and all that stuff later. But I hope you got the general idea. That's the kind of the bread and butter of the F-15. And next up, we can talk about sidewinders, flares, all that other stuff later. But just kind of wanted to, if you want to get your feet wet a little bit, that's the general idea. And you can set up an easy mission like this pretty quickly in the mission generator. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the unfriendly skies sometime soon. Okay, so track IR. I'm sorry, not track IR. TAC view. Just gonna accelerate time. Let's watch that first AMRAAM. Off it goes. And it almost hits. Second one fares much better. At a different target. Smack. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it.